I was in a full panic response. My mind is racing. I don't, I don't even know what the charge really means, right? We have this picture in our heads of shipping containers and borders, and I'm in this like small little mountain town. What the, huh? And then I'm like trying to build a story around, is he actually dead and somebody stole his wallet and they're arrested? And like, you're trying to, it makes so just no sense to anything. And then the fear kicks in. If they think he's involved, are they going to think I'm involved? Because it makes no sense, right? So my mind is doing all these crazy stories. And at the same time, everything in me, I'm a very loyal and action oriented person. So it's okay, he doesn't belong in jail. Something is wrong. I have to fix it. I have to help. That's my reaction, is not to believe it's true. Is this, there's some other explanation. Something is wrong. I have to take action.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you hit the subscribe button, it'll help us out a lot. Thanks again.
So, this is obviously a sad story. But why write a book?
So after everything was over, after my divorce was finalized, after the chaos ended, there was a deep calling in me to speak this story. There was this realization that I succeeded at something that so many people don't. So many people end up sharing custody with their abusers and their children's abusers. So many people, the system does not get things right, unfortunately, most of the time. And not only that, but I lived through something so shocking that felt like I was, it was better than a Lifetime movie, kind of just my real life. And people told me over and over, you should write a book. This is crazy. And after I succeeded, it was just this realization that I had this understanding that came through living through this and living through it to come out the other side and be able to speak into it. And so it was almost like I had to tell the story. I had to write the book. It was such a strong knowing. And even as I was writing it, the process that I went through and feeling into it, and then the research we did, nobody has ever written a book from the wife's perspective about human trafficking, not once. And when I learned that, it was, well, I have to. People need to understand there's so much more to this than the victims and the perpetrators. And I don't want to take away from their stories. But from the wife's perspective, somebody who truly did not know what was going on, and to then be faced with it, I felt like a different type of victim. And I needed to speak into that experience for others to both see themselves as well as to understand how much more complex this is.
So, the story itself, well, are there any, before we get into the story, any fictional stuff just for drama, or is it all pure straight?
It is all exactly as it happened.
What happened? How did it happen? I mean, it's an amazing story.
So back in 2016, I was a full-time stay-at-home mom. My kids were 1, 4, and 5, almost 6. And I'd been married 6 years. My husband was, he worked in for a credit card processing company and traveled for work. He was in internet security. And my life was what I thought was normal, right? I mean, he worked too much. We didn't spend as much time together as I wanted, but I had 3 young kids. That was my life. And his life was providing the financial means. And, there certainly was other challenges, but we didn't really fight. And mostly we didn't discuss anything that would cause a fight. But at the time, that was a look at us doing so well. And one night, he just doesn't come home from work. And that was unusual. He was late all the time. He didn't come home after bedtime regularly, but never not come home. And, I'm calling his phone and it starts going straight to voicemail. And because he worked so often long hours and often ignored my phone calls, I was like, whatever, he'll show up when he shows. I'm going to bed. And I went to bed and I woke up at 2 a.m. and he wasn't there. And at 5 a.m. he still wasn't there. And this was when I realized something had happened and my mind is spinning in crazy stories and everything. And at 5 a.m. I called non-emergency dispatch and they transferred me to the jail, where I learned that he in fact was there and he had been arrested for attempted human trafficking with a $250,000 bond. Yeah. And so that was the beginning of what turned into the next 4 years of uncovering and learning and processing everything that I didn't know.
So the first, I mean, obviously it's like kaboom, DUI, drugs or something. It's almost, not that that's acceptable, but it's like, okay, but this is like next level. What? So the first, I mean, you have kids, the first day, the next day, the first couple days, how stressful, psychotic was that? I mean,
I was in a full panic response. My mind is racing. I don't I don't even know what the charge really means, right? We have this picture in our heads of shipping containers and borders, and I'm in this like small little mountain town. What the huh? And then I'm like trying to build a story around, is he actually dead and somebody stole his wallet and they're arrested? And like, you're trying to, it makes so no sense to anything. And then the fear kicks in. If they think he's involved, are they going to think I'm involved? Because it makes no sense, right? So my mind is doing all these crazy stories. And at the same time, everything in me, I'm a very loyal and action oriented person. So it's okay, he doesn't belong in jail, something is wrong, I have to fix it, I have to help, I have to. That's my reaction, is not to believe it's true, is this, there's some other explanation, something is wrong, I have to take action. So at 5 a.m. when I learned that's where he is, I'm calling bail bondsmen, I'm calling lawyers. Nobody's answering me at 5 a.m., but I'm still calling, I'm leaving messages. Somebody will call me back in the morning, and the bail bondsmen actually do answer the phone at 5 a.m. And they tell you because they want your business. And the lawyer actually calls me back at 7 a.m. And so there are people working early hours, especially in the criminal world. And I start to slowly understand how the process works, but I still don't have any information. And the bail bondsman actually goes and checks on him, and because I don't even think it's him in jail. I'm not even sure about that. Right? So it's just so much is this impossibility. Little by little, I start to get pieces, and yet it actually takes almost 4 years for me to get the full story, because he wasn't willing to tell me the full story, as well as, when police are building a case, the thing people don't realize is family members don't get the evidence. They're building a case. They're actually trying to get more evidence from you. And so I don't actually get the full details until many years later.
any criminal history in the past from your husband? No wild man type of thing.
As he was the nerdy guy. Like it made zero sense. I mean, he told me when we got together, I was the fourth person he'd ever been with, and I was wife number three. So like I had built this story. He's not a guy who dates. He doesn't go to bars. He doesn't do any of that. Like not even in the supposedly like normal male way. And so just so far around away from who I knew him to be and who I knew myself to be, the life that we lived, the cognitive dissonance in believing there was any possibility of this was really, really intense.
Now, I mean, fast forward, looking back, were there any signs that you said like, "Oh, wait a minute, he wasn't as nice as I thought"?
Yes, red flags, 100%. Yes, so big red flags. When I met him, I was 18, and he was 9 years older than I was, and he was deeply interested in my teenage promiscuity, my pictures of me as a teenager. He also was married to wife number two, and I was the other woman for a year. Right, I was 19 and naive and believed the stories that he said. He also, as the relationship progressed, wanted me to invite other men into the bedroom. He wanted to watch me do different things. He had all of these sort of fantasies that he would test to see if I would play out, because I had such a teenage crazy time. And he would actually make me feel guilty if I didn't want to do those things, because that was not the relationship that we had. And I didn't want to bring that energy into this relationship. And I didn't love him enough. And so huge, huge red flags. But 19, 20-year-old me didn't see it that way, because at 19 and 20, I wasn't even processing what had happened to me as a teenager. I wasn't refused to be a victim. I refused to look at any of it as abuse or rape or statutory anything, even though at 15, 16, these were older men. So I refused to acknowledge my own past. And if anything, I romanticized it, which invited him to talk about it, be excited by it, and everything else. And so looking back, obviously, as I've processed and healed in different ways, I can see how the teenage version of me was in a lot of ways still attracting that type of man. And once we did officially get together and we got married and had children, I was no longer the one he could share those things with. And so I built a new story that it was a different relationship, and we grew up more, and now we're a family. And I didn't realize that he then still needed an escape from that, and that he continued to go down even darker paths.
How about family and friends when it was going on? Did they bail or did they support? What happened there?
His family deeply supported. His family really wanted me to stay around. This is not him. And if anything, really kind of leaned into he needed me in order to stay grounded and okay. And so I was so attached to the family unit and the belief and identity that carried. And so his family was very connected to that. My family was much more, you sure? And really treading carefully. My mom was a marriage and family therapist, and she was worked in a lot of addiction treatment centers, and she was much more aware of the various methods and modalities and some of the ways people lie and manipulate. And she tried very hard not to show her judgment, but I could feel it. And it actually pushed her away for a long time. Friends were cautious. They were curious. And also, I think there was their own level of shock and cognitive dissonance taking place. And they were more concerned about me and supporting me and my young children, and at the same time recognized that there was so much they likely didn't know. And so they really kind of kept a cautious distance. And many of them later completely cut off any connection to him. And if I was going to stay with him, then I was also kind of cut off. But later, as we separated, they kind of came back around and shared how confused in a lot of ways they were as well. There was only one other person who chose to believe like I did for as long as I did.
Now, your kids at the time were in school or not?
They were young, so the 1-year-old wasn't in school. The 4 and 5-year-old were in like preschool, kindergarten.
And reaction from the other parents?
Yeah, so the school was certainly more worried. There was articles in the paper. This was public knowledge. And so the school was, we had to have the conversation. We're following the bond. He can't be around schools. He can't be around other kids, like all of that going on. And the school was supportive of the children. Thankfully, they were very, their goal was to be the safe place for the kids, which I appreciated. And I'm sure they fielded other parent things, but I was the one who dropped them off and picked them up and did all of that. And so I think as long as he stayed away, the other parents, I didn't really hear any more from any parents directly. And the school kind of fielded, ensuring that the kids were safe and that they were following all of the protocols and things like that.
Now, approximately how long down the road did the kids grasp? Well, the 1-year-old, I guess it took a while, but did they grasp what, happened?
So they were not told what happened until after we like 4 years later. He refused. It was a big contentious point in therapy, because I put the kids in therapy because there was a lot going on. And, at that age, it's play therapy. It's some talk therapy. The kids they don't have quite the intellectual or developmental understanding. And the agreement was that he was going to come up with an age appropriate way to speak about this to them. And so all they knew was Daddy was in trouble and that he had these rules. That's all they knew. And he continued to refuse to disclose in the way that we agreed that he would. And it was something that I ended up having to do once I got full custody 4 years later.
Did you blame yourself at any time? Like, I mean, I know it sounds weird because you're not doing it, but did you say, "Oh my God, it must be my fault"?
Thing to blame yourself, unfortunately. I didn't blame myself for not being like a good enough wife. I think some people might have gone there. I didn't blame myself there. I later blamed myself for not seeing what I didn't see, and looking back and not and ignoring the red flags, for bailing him out of jail, for excusing behaviors, for staying in a relationship and pretending everything was totally fine. I blamed myself later for that, for more the things that I didn't do, rather than what I did do as far as the relationship was concerned.
Now, how long was it going on? I mean, you don't know immediately, but how long was he doing this for? I mean, like,
What he told me is that he had been soliciting adults since since he was 20. And so he's, almost 40 at the time, so 20 years. He told me that he stopped for a period of time when we got together, and that it started back up when my youngest, or my oldest, I should say, was 6 months old. And so there's a couple year window where he claims it's not happening, and all he would admit to was soliciting adults. He would never actually admit to the children. And yet he was arrested for trying to purchase an 11 and 14-year-old.
so, I mean, just to be clear, you hear human trafficking. So, was he finding kids and giving them to someone else that took them to another country or something, like, or was he actually involved sexually?
He was involved sexually. When you're a party to human trafficking, when you are purchasing children who cannot consent, who cannot be owned, and when you're taking possession of children, you are a participant of and a party to human trafficking. And so I don't have reason to believe, now I also don't know what I don't know, that he resold them off. I don't know about that. I don't know how deeply it got. It's statistically impossible for this to be the first time, even though he claimed that. But I do know that he was sexually participating with people who were not there of their own free will.
And this was in your area. I mean, where you live.
And well, not anymore, but yes, where we lived at the time, which was a small town in Colorado. He told me a lot of it also happened in Cincinnati, where he traveled for work quite regularly.
Where is he now?
As far as I know, he's exactly where he was. I have had no contact in almost 5 years now.
I mean, is he in jail?
No. No, Pete. So this is a thing people don't realize. In privileged white America, men do not go to prison for trying to purchase children. It's not upper middle class white men. No, 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 no. He spent 2 days in jail in the beginning, and he was given a plea deal, and the plea deal pled down to attempted solicitation of a minor, which you still think would come with jail time, but it didn't. It was 4 years of probation. So he received a plea deal. The goal for unfortunately, the goal that the prosecution and the DA's office is to get them in what they believe is treatment, and what they believe is actually rehabilitating. And so, and even talking to his lawyers, the most people get for these crimes is 30 to 60 days.
Well, what about the victims? Did anyone come forward and say, "Hey, this guy did this, that, and the other thing"? And
So nobody came forward that we know. The victims in this particular case were hypothetical victims. They were not real children. And so it was a sting operation that the FBI and local police department put on. And so and they actually do these quite often, where the stings, set these up, and they, post an ad, and people respond to the ad, and the charge is depending on how far they go through with. And he actually walked away from it. He didn't complete the transaction because they did things outside of the normal operating procedure. You don't pay first. And so he actually left. And he knew all of the protocol, and he knew all of the language, and they didn't follow the protocol. And because there was no actual children to hand over. The thing about this, though, is they're trying to get them off the street. They're trying to get them in treatment. But what ends up happening is they actually end up with no consequences.
that's crazy. I mean, Unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. And well, here's another one for you. In the state of Colorado, the constitutional right to parent is not removed for sex offenders. And so he had his full constitutional rights to his own children, which means when he pled guilty to attempted solicitation of a minor, he was able to move back into the home and have unrestricted access to his children, not to other children. He had rules and restrictions around schools and other things, but he is listed as a sex offender, yes. But yes, that will continue with him for up to potentially, he could actually, in Colorado, you can apply to get off the offender list after 10 years. But even more so, what that meant is once I started to wake up and see more of the truth, I then had a custody fight in front of me because the criminal case was not relevant in the family court case.
Yeah, you fast. I mean, I'm sure there's other tidbits in the book that are, we kind of blew through it, but that's the gist of it. And he's just out there, and you're doing your thing, hopefully, in a happy way. And the children, good.
The children are good. So today they're 10, 12, and 14. So it's been a lot and they're with me 100%. In 2020, I received full custody, and he has had no contact with them or me, and coming up on 5 years.
Now, in the book, are you using fictitious names or?
Only for, I use his name, and everybody else's names are changed. His crime is public record, as well as so is our divorce. And so it felt weird to both cite newspaper articles and not have his real name in there.
Right. So, what is the Golden Haven Foundation?
So that is a 501c that I started, and truly, to be completely transparent, still starting, working towards understanding how to fund nonprofits. But the biggest thing that I took away that is missing from the system is the privilege it takes to fight for safety for yourself and your children in abusive situations with family court. And the reality that so many people end up sharing custody with their abusers and their children's abusers. And this happens every day all over the world. The people with whoever has money is going to be more likely to succeed in a family court case because you don't even get a public defender in a family court case. And when the situations of domestic violence and abuse, sexual abuse, that you still have to go through the process. And it is actually the victim's job to educate the judge and jury, if there is one, on trauma and trauma bonding. And so the foundation's goal is to both help people come to the mental and emotional place where they actually can have the fight, because it wasn't the money that succeeded in my case. Money got me in the door, but I actually had to completely change my beliefs inside in order to have the energy to have this fight and to succeed. And so the foundation's goal is to both be educating as well as get to the point where we can offer cash grants to help pay for legal fees, because that doesn't exist today. There's women's shelters, there's food insecurity places, but nobody's helping with the legal battle. And I will say something that people don't realize is that human trafficking exists in every single town in this country, and people do not have any idea how prevalent it is. The reality that nobody knows is that it is under so many, it seems like these are just family towns or things like that, but it is everywhere. And you likely know somebody who is a participant and or a victim of this. And, the sex industry is everywhere. And this, unfortunately, is something that we think is mostly in other countries, and we think it's this foreign problem, but the opposite is true.
Can't judge a book by its cover, so to speak. I mean, what is I saw this in research, an energy healer.
So after I got out of the situation, it not only was this a realization of the what I needed to do, what this process was, but it was actually a very spiritual awakening as well. It was a really spiritual moment of realizing the power that I held, and the ways that I could not just manifest, but come to an entirely different way of being, because there was a very long period of time during the custody hearing that I was very likely going to end up sharing custody with a man who was already beginning to sexually groom his own children. And I couldn't proving that, because grooming, nothing quite happens. We're just crossing boundaries little by little. We're moving those lines. And in family court, you have to prove something already bad enough has happened that you can prove in order to justify taking away rights. And so I was really like, the writing was on the wall that this was just going to continue. And something happened within me that changed that. And it was an internal shift where I realized that I wasn't being accountable for my part in not seeing what was in front of me, on choosing this, on not wanting to be in this situation, on keeping any connection to their father because I still wanted to believe that there was another explanation. And not being accountable to those pieces was in a lot of ways what kept this situation stuck. And when I flipped that and switched it, just like weeks later, everything was different and evidence was different and I listened to things differently. And so it was this big kind of awakening and understanding in the power that I held in these situations, and that we all hold in, despite being victims, we still have the power, right? It's not our fault what happens to us, but it is our responsibility to change and to come out of it. And so that sort of awakening and understanding sent me on a very spiritual journey to understand trauma on a deeper level. And so to understand trauma, not just on a physical level, but on a mental and emotional and spiritual level, and the way that these patterns repeat in families, the way these patterns repeat in the world. And so I started really learning anything I could to get my hands on to understand, some people call it the quantum field, some people call it, just energy and frequency, but the idea that we can connect to more dimensions of our experience to help rewrite our experience.
Hmm. Excellent. I mean, they had a sting operation. They caught him, but because he wasn't actually caught with the person, he gets off. I mean, there's more to it than that, but so if they burst into a room and it's going on, that's got to be.
They're a lot likely to plea them out, right? There's a lot more evidence, and at the same time, there was multiple defendants in this particular case, and every one of them were offered a plea deal. They don't actually want to try these cases.
Why not?
I don't know if it's a resources thing. The only one who I think went to trial was the one that went to federal court, because that particular defendant crossed state lines. And so they crossed state lines, which meant it wasn't in the state court. And the federal side has a very different way of approaching these crimes, actually, and are much more serious. But anybody this happens to and it stays in state court, 90% of the time or more, they get plea deals, and it is a minimal amount of jail time.
Hmm. Now you do TED Talks also, correct?
I've given a TED Talk, yes.
Okay, just one or
One so far, at least. Yeah, the title is The Healing Power of Storytelling, but I tell my story.
yeah, I watched it. It's great.
Thank you.
I mean, and I don't even know if I should say that. I think it's a movie as far as the story.
Yes. Yes.
Not that I want to bring a light to it, but the way they get off of it is like, I think it's a movie that could be made easily with the storyline.
Yes. There is going to be a documentary this year that is started, but if somebody wants to buy the movie rights, come talk to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be. Let me ask you this, on a light moment. Let's say Hollywood comes. Hey, Amanda, who would you like to star as you in the movie?
That's a great question. I don't know. Maybe like a Reese Witherspoon, or like a somebody who has can play the wife that is. I used to be very confident and very different. I was very full of life. It would need to be somebody who could do that and also could play how much darkness I was living with and didn't see.
So did the life get sucked out of you after this?
No, before I had no idea how much the light was sucked out of me being married to him. I couldn't see it. I was so. No, there was no physical abuse, but there was a ton of mental and emotional. No screaming, but screaming is not always as abusive as silence. And refusing to come home and not answering your phone for hours, and then when you say that I would like to spend time as a family, being told that your feelings are not okay, and how dare you imply that I'm not doing everything I can. And withholding any attention or affection for years, while also making me feel like I wasn't participating financially and I wasn't doing enough and the house wasn't clean enough. Those things grate on you. And I wasn't allowed to make decisions at all. I wasn't allowed to make decisions about the house. I wasn't allowed to make decisions about the really other than the day to day.
Was he gaslighting without you knowing it?
Yes, absolutely. And I didn't believe my own mind anymore. I didn't believe my reality. And even after he was arrested, we got to the point where he wanted to be on the phone 24/7. I couldn't have a thought without him in my ear. And it's similar to what kidnapping victims go through with Stockholm syndrome. And my entire identity and reality was shaped by somebody else who was doing horrible things. And yet I didn't know how to exist without this person.
Mm, yeah, I know. Wow. So I'll wait for the movie, of course. Um, Nowadays, Amazon seems to be the place to go for a book. Are there any other avenues for you to, or for anyone to grab the book?
Um, so Amazon has it, yes. I believe it's also got extended distribution through Amazon. So there are, I think Barnes and Nobles can have it and things like that. There's some local bookstores here in Oregon today that have it.
Any audio version?
Yes, I recorded the audio version. It is there. A lot of people like Audible, and there's both Kindle and paperback if people prefer that.
Nice, nice. Well, let's jump outside the seriousness of the podcast at the moment, or subject, I should say. Before we wrap up, I have a little segment called This or That. It's just a preference thing to get to know Amanda, readers, what have you. It's a fun thing. So, for instance, preference. Now, this is just preference. Reading or writing?
Reading.
Pizza or pasta?
Pizza.
That's not good. You need pasta. No, I like both. I just pizza, and I'm like, God, I love pasta. I mean, I love both, but pasta, being Italian, is like it's in my veins. Anyway, all right. City or country?
City.
Dog or cat?
Cat. Yeah, don't tell my dog, but
This could be movies or what have you, but fiction or nonfiction?
I would say fiction for movies, but nonfiction for books.
Okay, that's a good answer. Would you rather travel back in time? And I don't mean your time, like I'm just saying, back to whatever, or back in time or into the future?
Future, for sure.
Okay. Snow or sand?
Sand.
Would you rather find a magic lamp or a flying carpet?
Flying carpet.
Because I'm thinking if you have a magic lamp, you could just wish for a magic carpet.
That's fair, but I feel like most wishes you can create in a different version, but flying.
That would be cool.
That would be cool.
All right. Lunch date or dinner date?
Dinner.
All right, last one. Movies or TV?
Movies.
The movies. Now, as you mentioned, Amazon, etc. You can get the book. I mean, I think it's a must read. I read some of it because you can only get a portion of it online, and I watched the TED Talk and all that. I mean, it's just a fact. It sucks you in. It's like, come on, let's see what's going to happen here.
The most common review is I couldn't put it down.
Yep, there you go. That's the ad. I couldn't put it down. But I appreciate you coming on. I really do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you hit the subscribe button, it'll help us out a lot. Thanks again.